In June 1950, North Korea prepared to launch an attack to reunite the Korean peninsula. The North Korean army was superior to the Southern army in almost every way. They had greater numbers, 135 versus 65,000. They had 150 T-34 tanks while the South had none. They had a small tactical air force while the South had none. They had 3 times more artillery, and the artillery had a better range. The South's army was in a sorry state. They were running very low on supplies with a lot of broken equipment. The Southern Command was alarmed by its weakness. However, the head of the Korean Military Advisory Group of the US Army was convinced that the Republic of Korea would be able to repel the North Koreans in the case of an invasion. At 4 a.m. on the 25th of June 1950, artillery and mortar fire opened up from coast to coast. The Republic of Korea's army wasn't ready for the attack. Many officers and some men were off on weekend passes. Of the divisions that were stationed at the border, only around a third of the men were actually manning the defences, with the rest in reserve. The Yongjin Peninsula was separated from the rest of South Korea and was largely indefensible. 3 tank landing ships managed to successfully evacuate the remaining men there. The ROK 1st Infantry Division guarded Kaesong, one of the historic capitals of Korea. The night before the attack, the North Koreans had relayed the track to the city. While the majority of their force attacked frontally, they sent around 1,000 men by train behind the South Korean defence. Kaesong fell by 0930 and most of the troops were killed or captured. It was ordered that the bridge across the Imjin River be destroyed once all of the 1st Division had withdrawn across it. However, the North Koreans followed so close that this wasn't possible. Despite fierce resistance, the bridge was taken intact. The main attack descended upon the ROK 7th Division along the Ijeongbu corridor that led directly to the capital Seoul. 2 armoured columns pushed along the roads that converged on the city. As prepared in response to a North Korean offensive, reserves were moved to counterattack. However, most of the reinforcing ROK 2nd Division hadn't arrived from Daejeon in time, and so had only a couple of hundred men ready. The commander thought it futile to attack, and instead planned to defend the eastern road. Along the western road, the ROK 7th Division successfully counterattacked and pushed the North Koreans back. However, the eastern road fell, and they had no choice but to retreat to avoid being surrounded. At Chuncheon, the defences were fully manned as the men were not given weekend passes. They managed to hold off the North Koreans for 3 days, inflicting more than 40% casualties on the attacking KPA 2nd Division and drawing in the KPA 7th Division, who were going to attack Hongcheon. In the east, the North Koreans simultaneously attacked the spread-out elements of the ROK 8th Division by both land and sea. The position was soon untenable, and the plan was put into motion to withdraw across the Taebaek Mountains, link up with the ROK 6th Division, and retreat to Busan via the Tanyang passes. The South Korean government and military command fled Seoul. With the failed counterattacks and the continued push of the North Korean army, Seoul descended into panic. Refugees crowded the roads as planes dropped leaflets calling for surrender. Rehearsed delaying tactics broke down in the shadow of the fearsome T-34 tanks. Prepared demolitions were not blown, roadblocks and obstacles were erected but abandoned. The South Koreans had no anti-tank mines to take advantage of the vehicles advancing through narrow passes. In the midst of this incompetence, one engineering team managed to improvise the destruction of 4 tanks on the approach to Seoul, but this was too little too late. Before midnight on the 27th of June 1950, the North Koreans had arrived on the outskirts of the capital. An order had been given to blow up the bridges crossing the Han River at 0130. One of the South Korean generals was sent to delay this destruction until civilians, troops and supplies could be moved south. His jeep was stopped by gridlocked traffic, and the bridge was crowded with vehicles and pedestrians. He needed to get to the police box on the north of the bridge to communicate the order to the demolition team on the south. When he was around 150 yards from the bridge at 0215, enormous explosions rocked the Han River. With no warning given to the soldiers and civilians, the bridges were destroyed. Hundreds of men, women and children had tragically been lost for no good reason. The North Koreans would not arrive at the river for another 6 to 8 hours. Civilians and thousands of soldiers with transports and heavy weapons were now trapped between the advancing North Korean army and the river. The troops that escaped waded through the river or took small boats. Despite fierce resistance, the capital of the Republic of Korea fell on the afternoon of the 28th of June 1950. The ROK army had been severely mauled by the North Korean attack. Of the around 100,000 soldiers and national police, only around a half remained. Most of the divisions had lost their equipment and transports, with 70% of their individual weapons being lost. Nonetheless, the ROK army would continue on fighting and hold out in hope of support from its allies. If you'd like to learn more about the Korean War, I would strongly suggest visiting the US Army Center for Military History and the book South of the Naktung, North of the Yalu by Roy Appelman. Links are in the description. 손꼽아